Hey, what's happening guys? Trunkoso here, and welcome back to a brand new Call of Duty Zombies Top 5, and in today's episode I'm going to be covering the top 5 NPC characters in Call of Duty Zombies. But before I get started, allow me to briefly explain what an NPC character is to those of you who might be a bit confused. An NPC, or non-player character, is essentially any character in a video game that is controlled by a game's artificial intelligence, or AI. So for example, on the map Transit, as I'm sure many of you watching will probably know about the bus driver Ted the robot. Ted is an NPC because he isn't a player himself, but he does have dialogue and he interacts with the player the moment they hop onto the bus, and every now and again he'll say something depending on what you do. Now there are other NPCs that are people like Ravenov on Firebase Z and Cold War Zombies, but for this list exclusively, I'm mainly going to focus on individual NPCs that have an overall greater purpose in their respective maps, such as helping players with a variety of tasks, whether that's killing zombies, building things for the player, reviving them if they go down, and things like that. Normally a lot of these NPCs you can summon for points for extra backup against the zombies, or they could already be on the map waiting to assist the player, or eventually deliver something of use. But now that I've explained what NPCs are and my criteria for the list, without further ado, let's get right into the top 5 NPCs in Call of Duty Zombies. And coming in at number 5, we have George A. Romero from Call of the Dead. Now right off the bat, I know what you're probably thinking. Marco, why is George on this list? Isn't he a boss zombie more so than an NPC? And to answer that, technically yes he is. If you've ever played Call of the Dead on Black Ops 1, this might be a very confusing pick because George, unlike the other NPCs I'm going to talk about later on, is the only hostile NPC I'm putting on this list and the only one that is considered a boss zombie. But the main reason I decided to include George is mainly for two reasons. The first and the most important one is that while George again is a boss zombie and is always hostile towards the player, he's sort of an anomaly when it comes to bosses and NPCs as a whole. Unlike your traditional boss, like a Panzer for example, George doesn't spawn into the game on a specific round such as round 8 when the Panzer spawns on Origins for the first time. Rather, George spawns in as soon as you start your game, and he never really goes away for the remainder of the game. In this sense, I have to admit that a lot of the time, George doesn't actually feel like a boss to me, and more along the lines of an NPC that just follows you around wherever you go. I rarely run into him because I try to keep my distance, and unless I accidentally shoot him, all he does really is just move around the map at a walking pace and occasionally say or shout something at the player. And while this dialogue can get very old after a while, I do have to admit that every now and again he does say something pretty funny. And overall, unless he's sprinting at me or near my train, I don't ever really feel threatened by George. In fact, I feel like he's just an unconventional NPC that's just there. But the other reason I picked him for the number 5 spot was because upon killing him, he rewards the player massively with a free perk along with a Wunderwaffe, which is essential for anyone who wants to get to a high round. And again, I know there's other bosses and zombies that can give you a free perk and maybe even a wonder weapon, but on Call of the Dead especially, this is extremely crucial for long-term games. So even though George as a boss and as an NPC can be annoying at times, I still think he's overall good because of those two reasons I just explained. And this is why over the years I've also grown to accept George being on the map and to not be as frustrated with him as I used to be. Also, rest in peace to the real-life George Romero. When he was still alive, he did so much for film and the horror genre as a whole, and to be fair, I don't believe that COD Zombies would exist as we know it if it weren't for George, so I have a lot of respect for the man. But the reason I'm putting George in my number 5 spot and not any higher is simply because at the end of the day, he is a boss zombie even if he doesn't always feel like it most of the time, and I promise from here on out, the rest of this list will only consist of friendly NPCs, but I still personally believe George Romero from Call of the Dead is a good NPC and a good boss nonetheless, so that's why I cheated a bit here. But moving on to number 4, we have the one and only Ted the Robot from Transit. Now, I'll be honest guys, I think out of everyone on this list, this guy is probably the most iconic NPC of them all. I mean, who could forget Ted the bus driver? He's only the face of Transit and of a lot of YouTubers' thumbnails, so he must be a pretty kick-ass guy, right? Well, not exactly. So unlike George Romero or the 3 other guys I'm going to talk about later on, Ted is the only NPC on this list that doesn't really do anything for the player. Now obviously he does drive the bus, which is a key feature of Transit, but as far as gameplay goes and aiding the player long-term in their game, he doesn't really do jack. All he does is drive the bus in a continuous loop around the map and stop for a minute or two in between stops. He doesn't kill zombies, he doesn't grab parts for the player or give out free perks, but instead he's just there. But honestly, I think that reason alone makes him pretty cool, and his presence adds to the map in a good way in my opinion, and overall I think he just makes Transit way more memorable. Other than his presence, I also wanted to point out that Ted does have some pretty funny dialogue from time to time, but especially if you knife him repeatedly, which is something that me and my friends used to do all the time back in the day when we were like 9 and 10, because we just thought it was the funniest ever. So all in all, while Ted himself isn't very useful, he is iconic at the end of the day and is probably one of the most memorable features of Transit in Black Ops 2 Zombies as a whole, if not all of Zombies, so I wanted to give him some recognition and put him in at the number 4 spot on today's list, because I think he deserves it. And moving on to the number 3 spot, we have the Civil Protector from Shadows of Evil on Black Ops 3. For those of you who haven't played Shadows of Evil or simply don't remember this guy, the Civil Protector is essentially like a RoboCop bodyguard that you can call into the map for 2,000 points, but before you can do that you must first locate 3 fuses around the map and then place them into an electrical box in the room where the swords and Widow's Wine are located. After you do that, you'll have access to 4 what I like to call RoboCop panels throughout the map where you can call this guy in to help you fight off the zombies. The Civil Protector is pretty effective both non-upgraded and upgraded, and he's more than capable of eliminating plenty of zombies. And another cool thing is that if you're going for high rounds and camping behind the gate to the waterfront district, if a Margwa spawns in and you summon the Civil Protector at that location's panel, he can actually land on the Margwa as soon as it spawns and insta-kill it, which is not only convenient, but it also makes high round attempts a lot easier. He's also very useful when you're doing the flag step of the Easter egg, because during said step there will be tons of parasites and meatballs spawning in, and since you need to focus primarily on shooting the Shadow Man, the Civil Protector is very helpful because he can help to kill a lot of the other mini bosses that will spawn in. And if you don't have the Fear and Headlights Gobblegum to make this step easier, the Civil Protector is a pretty decent substitute. But not only can he kill zombies and Margwas, but if you end up going down, he can actually revive you, as I'm going to unintentionally demonstrate here. And if you had Quick Revive before you went down, you'll actually keep the perk, which is something that I was unaware of until getting this gameplay. But overall, the Civil Protector is pretty awesome, and for the price of using him, I'd say he's more than worth it. And at the time when Black Ops 3 first came out, he was pretty unique, and later down the line we'd see the introduction of very similar characters into future maps. And speaking of very similar characters, coming in at number 2, we have the new and improved version of the Civil Protector, and that is Klaus the robot from Mauer Toten, which also happens to be my personal favorite character in Cold War Zombies. Just like the Civil Protector, Klaus was designed to help protect the player by killing a bunch of zombies, although unlike the Civil Protector, Klaus is more unique because he not only plays a very important role in the map and its Easter egg, but he also has a very unique personality of his own. You see, unlike the operators that you play as, Klaus has a lot of very funny and badass dialogue written for him, and he speaks more than all of the operators in the game combined, and I'm not joking when I say that. One could say that this is just due to poor choices by the Cold War Zombies developers and writers, and while I would certainly agree with that argument, I also think it elevates Klaus a lot because the lack of character dialogue gives him a strong presence in the map, as he basically steals the show for the most part. But on top of that, he's also useful for a lot of tasks around the map. For one, you need him to get the free Cerberus from the safe, but you also need him for the train step of the Easter egg, as well as the final step after you beat Valentina, so as far as story goes, he is pretty important, but also in terms of general gameplay, he is very helpful as a backup. Once you build and summon him, he'll start killing zombies left and right like a Terminator, and he'll fly around and follow the player as long as he's active. But another awesome thing about Klaus is that he can also be upgraded twice, and will eventually reach a point where he'll be able to kill zombies on any round, which gives him extra points as far as high round attempts and overall longevity goes. And overall, Klaus is just a very useful feature and character on Mauer Toten. Even if you decide not to use him in your high round runs, if you change your mind, you can always go to your nearest call box and summon him for 2,000 points, and he'll do his job well.
I'll guarantee that.
Alright guys, and coming in at number 1 on today's list of the best NPCs in Call of Duty Zombies, we have the one and only Leroy the Giant from the map Buried in Black Ops 2. So whenever someone brings up the map Buried, the chances are you'll probably be thinking about a multitude of different features. Some people may remember the Paralyzer, the map's wonder weapon, others may remember the Witch's House or Vulturade, or maybe the Time Bomb, but whatever it is, I don't think any of these features compare to the map's largest one, pun intended, and of course I'm referring to my man Leroy the Giant. I feel like in 2022 it's very easy to forget how revolutionary Leroy's addition was to zombies, but at the time I don't think anyone in the zombies community saw him coming. For the first time ever, we had an active, friendly, non-player character that was present in the map that's main role was to help the player out by completing a variety of tasks. As well as that, his debut was pretty awesome because when you're playing zombies by yourself, it's generally a lot more intimidating and sometimes can be lonely, so it was pretty unique to have another friendly presence in the game. But going back to what I said, the reason Leroy is here at number 1 other than his positive vibes is that he can do so much for you around the map. For example, if you give this guy some candy and you're surrounded by a horde of zombies, he'll essentially become a bodyguard for you for a certain period of time and mercilessly kill any zombies within his sight. So I suppose if you're either low on ammo or just want to help speed up the rounds, or maybe you just want to do a step for the Easter egg, this ability is actually very helpful. Along with his combat abilities, he can also provide manual labor for you at the cost of 1 bowl of Jawbreakers or a glass of tequila, such as breaking barriers to access more of the map, crafting buildables at a workbench, or locking the mystery box down to one location for the rest of the game, which is also a very useful ability, as having to chase down the box in the maze can be pretty damn annoying when you forget to lock it down beforehand. And to top it off, Leroy also happens to be a wizard, as he can transform drops whenever he is near one and you give him some candy. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm sure in his 800 plus years of living, he was probably trained by Yoda at some point, but anyways, as cool as this ability is, it's not always practical, as you'll see here he turns this double points into a carpenter. But sometimes it does work out and you'll get a max ammo, and the ability as a whole is still pretty cool nonetheless. But overall, Leroy is phenomenal, and I think he fits perfectly into Buried as sort of a sidekick to the player, although he is very overpowered in a lot of situations, like for example being able to keep things like the mystery box in one location for an entire game, or having a giant bodyguard follow you around are among some of the things that make Buried a pretty easy map, but that's not to say that Leroy makes the map worse. In fact, I think it's the opposite actually. If he wasn't in Buried, all I see is a much worse map, and it's not very common in zombies where you can say that one single individual makes the map awesome, other than maybe Klaus on Mauer or Toten. But Leroy came first, and I'll never forget how awesome it was when I was 10 years old playing Buried for the first time with the homies and seeing him on the map. Even now, 10 years later, he's still really unique, and we haven't seen a lot like him since. So Leroy, for those reasons, comes in today at number 1. Leroy bro, you deserve it. Good job. And with that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you agreed or disagreed with my list, and also if you haven't done so already, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more future content. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to watch my video. I hope you have a tremendous rest of your day, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.